Hello bookworms, I'm Hannah, and it's time to talk about the best books I read in 2017. My final count for the year was 209 books. I've narrowed that list down to 10 books. Right now, some of you are thinking, 209 books? That's a lot. How do you read so much? I made a video answering that question and I'll link to it in the description box down below. A quick note before I get started, I'm excluding from this list obvious 5-star books that everyone should read or probably already has read, like Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling or The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. If for some crazy reason you still haven't read Rowling's or Tolkien's books, I suggest making 2018 the year you rectify that oversight because you deserve to have those books in your life. Without further ado, here are the absolute best, the creme de la creme, the must-reads from 2017 I had to wade through 209 books to discover. In order from least to top favorite, first up is Word by Word, The Secret Life of Dictionaries by Corey Stamper, a non-fiction jaunt through the hallowed cubicles of Merriam-Webster, where lexicographers quietly work to extricate the etymological origin, pronunciation, and definition of every word in the English language. Stamper proves a witty guide through the idiosyncratic world of lexicography, where working in silence is mandatory and triumphs are celebrated in soundless fist pumps. Her humorous insights remain punchy and fresh as she touches on myriad aspects of her job, such as the challenges of defining the smallest words like is, her response to discovering irregardless in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and how society's prejudices are taken into account when defining words. Learning about the complexities of the English language has never been this much fun, packed with amusing stories, comical footnotes, fun facts, and a pinch of $10 words. Word by Word is the perfect book for linguists, grammar fanatics, and word mavens. My favorite takeaway from this book is borborygmus, a word that describes the rumbling, grumbling sound of gas moving through one's intestines. Next up is another nonfiction book, Romantic Outlaws by Charlotte Gordon. This dual biography intimately explores the lives of two remarkable women, with chapters alternating between Mary Shelley, the romantic visionary who wrote Frankenstein, and her trailblazing feminist mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, author of A Vindication of the Rights of Women. This is the type of biography that only emerges after exhaustive research. It's a fascinating account of how Mary Shelley was influenced by her mother's legacy and what hurdles she overcame as an author, wife, and mother. Even more intriguing are the revelations about Mary Wollstonecraft, a woman who advocated for women's education and independence at the expense of her own happiness and her reputation. Anyone interested in learning more about these two extraordinary women who scandalized Victorian England with their unorthodox lifestyles and progressive attitudes about women's rights are well advised to read this book. Moving on, we get to a literary behemoth, The Sport of Kings by C.E. Morgan. This sweeping multi-generational saga follows 3 detestable protagonists. Henry Forge, an uncompromising man descended from one of Kentucky's oldest and most powerful dynasties, whose interest in breeding the next thoroughbred superhorse is a lifelong obsession. His daughter, Henrietta, who's influenced by her father's breeding fervor to a startling degree. And Almond Shaughnessy, a young black farmhand with an appetite for success that inextricably links him to the Forge family's goal of winning the Triple Crown. Morgan's controversial book was shortlisted for the 2017 Bailey's Women's Prize. It was loved by some and scorned by others. I see it as a triumphant success that masterfully blends history with fiction. This book is a tapestry of compelling interludes, complex protagonists, rich secondary and tertiary characters, and an expansive network of interbreeding. With decadent prose, Morgan escorts readers through an unflinching exploration of family legacies, the cascading effects of slavery and racism, and the more unsettling aspects of racing thoroughbred horses. If you're looking for a challenging read that's ripe with symbolism and steeped in poignant themes, The Sport of Kings is the book for you. Next is the first book in a new series by one of my most beloved authors, Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, a young adult fantasy about a man named Laszlo Strange. He's an orphan and a bibliophile who works as an apprentice in the dusty sublevels of the Great Library of Zazma, where he secretly studies the language and lore of the fabled lost city of Weep. When a heroic figure who names himself Godslayer arrives in Laszlo's village in need of help, the opportunity to search for the lost city is suddenly within Laszlo's grasp, if he can find the courage to cross the world with this mysterious stranger. This book offers everything you could want from an epic fantasy: whimsy, magic, mystery, adventure, love, sacrifice, and it's adorned with the fanciful flourishes that make Taylor's books irresistible. A narrative inspired by mythology, fantasy, and various religions, luscious prose evocative of mysticism and romanticism, and a spellbinding array of characters, including, but not limited to, a mischievous alchemist, a sage monk, and a beautiful goddess with skin blue as opals, lips stained damson, and pockets filled with plums. The city of Weep holds such allure that I yearned to cross the world with Laszlo, and you will too. I challenge you to read the first 2 pages of this book and just try and see if you can walk away from it. If you're looking for a dazzling tale to escort you to unexplored realms, look no further than Strange the Dreamer. We return to the study of family legacies and the brutalities of slavery in The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This is the story of Cora, a teenage girl on a Georgia plantation in the antebellum South who's an outcast among her people. She meets a slave named Caesar who tells her about the Underground Railroad. Fueled by their desire for freedom, Cora and Caesar begin their odyssey as runaway slaves together, with a fanatical slave catcher following close behind. The Underground Railroad won the 2016 National Book Award for Fiction. It took home the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2017, and it earned a spot on the 2017 Man Booker Prize longlist. Clearly, Whitehead's depiction of the Underground Railroad as a literal subterranean locomotive and his sophisticated retelling of the indignities Black people suffered in the pre-Civil War era resonated with a wide audience. Despite its weighty themes and dark subject matter, this book is an accessible read that explores American history through the eyes of a resilient young woman. It's peppered with engrossing short chapters about secondary and tertiary characters, and its conclusion is hard-hitting. In my opinion, the lasting effects of this book stem from Whitehead's ingenious use of dramatic irony. Next up is The Monk by Matthew Lewis, a gothic horror novel about a respected monk who's so overtaken with desire for a young girl that he abandons his monastic vows and begins a terrifying descent into a life of depravity. When it was first published in 1796, The Monk was considered profane, blasphemous, and obscene. Audiences were so offended by its content that, a year after publication, an injunction was obtained to prohibit sale of the book, so naturally everyone bought it in record numbers to see what all the fuss was about. How does it measure up by today's standards? I'm pleased to say that it remains a scintillating read with diabolical characters and devastating twists. If you've read The Monk and can recommend something equally lyrical and affecting, please tell me about it in the comments below. With transcendent prose and one of the most memorable conclusions I've ever encountered in a book, The Monk is a beguiling portrayal of the fall of man as he succumbs to greed, power, and lust. This next book qualifies as the creepiest book I have ever read, Hex by Thomas Oldeheufeldt. The seemingly picturesque town of Black Spring is haunted by a 17th century witch whose eyes and mouth are sewn shut. Though she lets herself into people's homes and watches them while they sleep, the townspeople are careful not to disturb the witch, save for a group of rebellious teenagers who one day decide that harassing the witch is a harmless way to cure their boredom. Not everyone appreciates the subtlety of Hex. The creep factor hinges significantly on tension that builds in a gradual yet exponential manner. The narrative is like twisted rope, pulled tighter and tighter with each passing chapter. You know it's liable to snap at any moment, and you're just waiting for it to happen. The original Dutch version of Hex has a different setting and conclusion. The setting is inconsequential to me, but I prefer the English ending. If you snag this book on my recommendation, get the English edition if you're able to, and brace yourself for a chilling thriller that blends a contemporary setting with elements of horror and dark fantasy. Now let's talk about Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This cyberpunk techno-thriller is about a man named Jason who bought... On second thought, I'm not going to tell you about the premise of this book. I didn't know a thing about it when I picked it up, and that significantly enhanced my reading experience. That's an understatement. This book made my head explode. Of all the books mentioned in this video, Dark Matter is the one I'd most readily recommend to any and every reader. If you make the smart choice to read this book, do not look at the synopsis. Just pick it up and start reading. You'll soon find yourself captive to a book with superb plot pacing, tense writing, and a mind-bending, astonishing, totally unexpected, and thoroughly engaging story. Second from the top is Refugee by Alan Gratz, a middle-grade novel about 3 children whose stories take place decades apart but are linked in surprising ways. There's Joseph, a Jewish boy living in Nazi Germany in 1939, Isabel, a Cuban girl whose homeland is plagued by civil unrest in 1994, and Mahmoud, a boy living in war-torn Syria in 2015. All 3 children must abandon their homeland and make a perilous journey in search of refuge. Refugee is one of the most intense books I've read in years. With increasing severity, chapters conclude at breathless moments. At the heart of these harrowing tales are 3 vulnerable, innocent children. The magnitude of what's at stake is discomforting, to say the least. Some of the graphic violence has raised eyebrows with regard to the recommended age group for this book, but what I find most shocking about Refugee is that the terrifying encounters these fictional characters face, particularly Mahmoud, are at present being experienced by real children. In terms of historical and cultural significance, Refugee is a profound and valuable contribution to children's literature. If it's not nominated for the Newbery Medal, I will be heartbroken. It's time to talk about the best book I read in 2017. My #1 pick out of 209 books of all the classics, esteemed literary novels, eye-opening works of nonfiction, and rousing adult fiction I read, the book that absolutely stole my heart was a contemporary young adult novel. I did not see that coming. Which just serves as a reminder for me to remain open-minded about the books I read and to continue exploring a diverse array of categories and genres in 2018. My favorite book of the year is Far from the Tree by Robin Benway. When I reviewed this book in my November wrap-up, I didn't say much about it because I want all of you to be surprised by it in the same way I was. For that reason, this is all I'm going to say about the synopsis. It opens with a girl named Grace who thinks she's an only child but soon learns she has siblings she never knew about. I'm aware that the subject matter of Far from the Tree resonates deeply with me on a personal level, but my proclamation that it's my favorite book goes so far beyond my own sentimental attachment to the story. I've ranked this book highest because it's superlative storytelling. Benway has crafted a novel that features distinct characters with complex inner lives. She closely examines a commendable number of topics, yet the narrative remains uncluttered. This is a compassionate, moving, and memorable meditation on what it means to be family. It's also the only book I read this year that made me laugh, then cry. I'm talking ugly cry, with puffy eyes and snot running down my face. Far from the Tree won the 2017 National Book Award for Young People's Literature. It was the apex of my reading year, and I hope all of you find time to read this extraordinary book. Now that I've shared my best books of 2017, the next logical step seems like a worst books video, but my list of worst books hasn't changed much since the video I posted mid-year. Rather than post another video rehashing my disdain for those disappointing reads, I'm going to list my worst reads of 2017 in the description box. If I already posted a video reviewing a worst book, I'll link to that video next to the book title. I'm always interested in expanding my TBR, so please tell me about your best read of 2017 in the comments below. Thanks, everybody!